In the late 20s and early 30s, Poland found itself in a very unenviable position. Literally. It had been an independent country for only about a decade and was sandwiched between Hitler and Stalin, both of whom were happy to tell their people and everyone else that the only reason Poland existed was because of the treaties that ended World War I, which were forced on them. In short, they wanted their land back. I don't have to tell you how this ends. The naval historian Norman Friedman once said he had the idea of predicting future wars by asking each country where they thought their border should be, but no one was willing to fund it. Given current events, I wonder if he could get funding for that now. Being so young, Poland didn't have the economy or industry to effectively match either, let alone both. Obviously, any war would mostly fall on the Army and Air Force. The main contributions of the Navy would be, well, let's start with this map so everyone understands the geography. As you can see, in the middle of the coast bordering Lithuania is East Prussia, dominated by Königsberg, now Kaliningrad, but that's another story. This exclave essentially belonged to and was part of Germany. In green to the left of it is the city of Danzig, which was a neutral, open city belonging to, theoretically, nobody. This left the ports of Gdynia and Kiel in Polish hands. Why this kidnapping of their coast was acceptable to Poland is simple. They had no choice. They were pawns of larger powers. Anyway, it was understood in a war the main job of the Polish Navy would be to provide fire support along the coast, or run supplies to encircled forces, or to break up any amphibious assault and generally protect the coastline. Now, if you're a small navy facing a bigger navy, your options on how to do that are limited. Coastal artillery is one, but that usually falls to the Army. Airstrikes is another, but that generally falls to the Air Force, both of which will probably be busy elsewhere. A small navy's best hope was mines and submarines. Mines and submarines had been brutally effective in World War I, and everyone knew it. They were also relatively cheap. As such, the Polish Navy would heavily focus on mine laying or sweeping. By the way, this is a pattern you'll see with many smaller navies in the interwar period. It wasn't going to stop either enemy, but it was hoped it would slow them down long enough for help from friendly countries to arrive. Realistically, the Poles wanted British ships from the beginning, but being such a small economy, they couldn't pay for them. The British government, for their part, weren't willing to back any loans. Enter the French. Under the French system, bribes and kickbacks were not only legal, but encouraged. They just called it commissions. So the French politicians co-signed the loans with the understanding that part of the profits, including interest, would be tossed back to their campaign funds, if not directly to their pockets. So, on May 11th, 1934, the Polish Navy ordered the 2,271-ton mine layer Gryf from the French to a Franco-Polish design with Swedish Bofors weapons. Started November 14th, 1934, and completed February 27th, 1938. She was somewhere between a destroyer and a light cruiser. As such, she was the largest combat ship in the Polish Navy at the start of the war. Not surprisingly, her construction was incredibly stretched out, with numerous delays. The two Grom-class destroyers, built by the British, were started after her, but both completed before her. As a mine layer, she wasn't evacuated just before the start of the war, and instead stayed to fight. Not surprisingly, she didn't last long. Main armament was 6 120mm 50 caliber guns, 2 mounts forward and 2 aft, super firing, with the lower mounts being twins and the upper mounts being singles. These were low-angle guns and couldn't help in the anti-aircraft role. Medium anti-aircraft was provided by 2 twin 40mm Bofors. In line with her primary role, 600 mines could be carried. Propulsion was provided by 2 diesels, venting to one funnel, generating 6,000 horsepower for a top speed of 20 knots. She had no appreciable armor. On September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded, she immediately left port at Gdynia, tried to lay a minefield, got bombed, and headed to Heel. While docked there on September 3rd, she was bombed again and sunk.